Welcome to Coffee Break. Thoughtful conversations for a busy world. Let's begin.
Have you ever had one of those seemingly perfect moments?
Oh, I think everyone knows exactly what you mean.
Right. You know the kind I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're like relaxing on a Sunday afternoon. The house is completely quiet.
Mm-hmm.
The sunlight is filtering through the windows just right. And dust motes are just sort of suspended there, dancing in the air.
It's idyllic.
It is. You've got a cup of coffee that is the exact perfect temperature.
Yeah.
Your family, your friends, everyone you care about is safe, healthy, and accounted for.
Yeah.
You take this deep breath, feeling this really profound, rare sense of absolute well-being, and then out of nowhere, you feel a violent spike of panic.
Just a sudden cold wash of dread right down the back of the neck.
Exactly.
And it's usually accompanied by a very real physiological shift, you know?
Oh, absolutely. It's a completely visceral reaction. Your heart rate ticks up, your stomach tightens.
Yeah, the physical symptoms are undeniable.
And your brain, which was just, enjoying a perfectly good Sunday, starts racing. It starts screaming, what am I missing? Who is about to get sick?
What massive, life-ruining oversight have I made?
Right. It's as if the sheer fact that everything is okay is somehow the undeniable proof that something terrible is imminent.
Sitting on a couch completely terrified by your own peace and quiet is a universally recognizable human experience.
It really is.
But it feels deeply isolating when you're the one in the middle of it. You feel like your brain is actively working against you, destroying the exact scenario you've worked so hard to achieve.
And that tension right there is the core of what we are pulling apart in our deep dive today.
It's a fascinating topic.
We're looking at a short, but honestly incredibly potent excerpt titled, The Anxiety of Anticipated Misfortune. Why being happy feels like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
There is an entire universe of human psychology wrapped up in those few words.
Totally. We're exploring the phenomenon of foreboding joy, why peace often feels like a literal trap, and the tragic ways we sabotage our best moments because we are utterly terrified they just won't last.
It's a cycle so many of us are trapped in.
So let's start with that main title, The Anxiety of Anticipated Misfortune.
Well, the psychological weight of this entire concept really hinges on one specific word in that title.
Which is?
Anticipated. If we look closely at the phrase anticipated misfortune, we have to reckon with the fact that the misfortune we are agonizing over hasn't actually arrived.
Right, it isn't real.
It hasn't happened. It's a phantom.
It's an apparition we've just, invited into the living room.
Exactly. It is entirely a creation of the mind. The anxiety you are feeling on that Sunday afternoon does not exist in your present reality.
Because your present reality is just the warm coffee and the safety.
Right. The anxiety exists exclusively in the cognitive gap between a peaceful present and a manufactured, disastrous future that your brain has simply invented out of thin air.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that is a totally baffling thing for an intelligent species to do to itself.
It seems completely counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does. Imagine worrying about anticipated misfortune is like paying incredibly high interest on a massive debt that you haven't even incurred yet.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You haven't taken out the loan, you haven't bought the house, you haven't swiped the credit card.
But you're paying anyway.
Yeah. You are sitting there voluntarily transferring your emotional life savings to the bank to cover the interest on a totally imaginary mortgage.
It's exhausting.
Why on earth do our brains force us to pay a toll for a disaster that genuinely does not exist?
What's fascinating here is that to understand why we willingly pay that interest, we have to look at the brain's default mode network and the amygdala.
Okay.
The brain isn't actively trying to torture you, even though it absolutely feels that way. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, your brain is functioning exactly as it was designed to.
Wait, really?
Yes. It is trying to protect you.
I mean, I hear that, but protecting me from what? The coffee getting cold? The quiet?
Protecting you from the unknown. You see, the human brain is, at its core, a highly advanced prediction machine.
A prediction machine.
Okay, its primary directive, above all else, is survival. And one of the most effective ways it keeps you alive is by constantly scanning the environment.
Like radar.
Exactly like radar. It's gathering microscopic data points and projecting potential future scenarios. It wants to map out what's coming next.
So it can be ready.
Right, so it can flood the body with the necessary neurochemicals like cortisol and adrenaline to react. If you can anticipate a threat, you can survive a threat.
So the ancient human who anticipates the predator in the tall grass,
Survives to pass on their genes.
while the one who is just enjoying the warm sunshine gets eaten.
That's the evolutionary bottleneck in a nutshell. The ability to anticipate is a spectacular advantage.
I mean, obviously, it allowed us to build civilizations, right?
Yes, stockpile food for the winter, invent engineering safety standards, all of it. But this neural system is heavily biased toward the negative.
Negativity bias, right?
Exactly, a well-known concept in psychology. Think about the risk assessment of our ancestors. A false positive believing there's a predator in the grass when it's just the wind costs you a few calories of adrenaline.
Not a big deal in the grand scheme of things.
But a false negative believing it's just the wind when it's actually a predator, that costs you your life.
Wow. So the penalty for a false negative is infinite.
Exactly, infinite.
So the brain just constantly overpredicts danger because it's the safest bet.
It's the safest biological bet, yes. Your brain is wired to overpredict danger, which means it constantly projects worst-case scenarios.
Just to be safe.
Yeah, it honestly believes it is doing you a favor by preparing you for danger. The underlying logic of the brain is that it's trying to soften the blow of a potential future tragedy.
By forcing you to practice the pain of it right now.
Precisely.
It's making me practice the pain. That is a devastating realization.
It really shifts how you view your own anxiety.
But we aren't living on the savannah anymore. We don't have to worry about predators in the tall grass when we're sitting in a climate-controlled living room.
Very true.
Shouldn't neuroplasticity have updated this software by now?
Well, neuroplasticity allows for individual adaptation, sure, but evolutionary shifts take hundreds of thousands of years.
Oh, right. It's a slow process.
Very slow. We are walking around modern, relatively safe environments equipped with nervous systems that were optimized for a brutal, high-mortality Pleistocene environment.
So the hardware is outdated.
Essentially, yes. It takes this incredible, natural human ability of anticipation, which is meant to be a useful tool for logistical planning, and mutates it into an endless source of present-moment suffering.
Because it doesn't know how to turn off.
Exactly.
Right.
Your brain prefers the absolute certainty of a predicted misery over the terrifying vulnerability of unexpected pain.
But the irony is, practicing the pain doesn't actually soften the blow.
It doesn't.
If the terrible thing does happen, it still hurts just as much. You've just ruined the perfectly good time you had beforehand by agonizing over it.
It's a double loss.
To go back to the debt analogy, you've paid the high interest for years, and then if the debt actually comes due, you still have to pay the entire principal anyway.
You're suffering twice.
Yeah, you're suffering twice.
And that leads us to the core tension of this phenomenon. If our brains are operating as these hypervigilant prediction machines, constantly anticipating future disaster to keep us safe, it completely fractures our present moments of happiness.
Because you can't do both at once.
Right. You cannot biologically be in a state of high alert survival, a sympathetic nervous system response, and a state of relaxed joy, a parasympathetic nervous system response at the exact same time.
They cancel each other out.
The nervous system doesn't allow for simultaneous fight or flight and rest and digest.
The two systems are completely mutually exclusive. Yeah. Which forces us to look at the core metaphor provided by our source material today.
The other shoe.
Yes, the subtitle. Why being happy feels like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. I feel like this phrase is thrown around so casually that we've just, become numb to what it actually depicts.
It's become a cliche.
Waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Well, let's conduct a deeper semantic and historical analysis of that specific phrase, because the wording is incredibly revealing about human cognition.
Where does it even come from?
The imagery originates from living in crowded tenement housing or apartments with incredibly thin ceilings in the late 19th and early 20th century.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You hear the person upstairs take off one heavy work boot and drop it on the floor. Thud.
And then?
What happens to your nervous system in the ensuing silence?
Oh, I see. You immediately tense up.
Exactly.
Your attention is entirely captivated by the ceiling, waiting for the second boot.
Yeah.
You literally can't focus on anything else until you hear it.
And that is the trap of the metaphor right there. It implies a strict, unbreakable, mechanical sequence.
One shoe hits the floor.
Therefore, by the inviolable laws of physics and human habit, the second one absolutely unequivocally must follow.
It's inevitable.
When we map this tenement housing metaphor onto our complex emotional lives, we are making a massive cognitive error.
How so?
We are treating happiness or success as the first shoe. We are declaring that a moment of joy is merely the initiation of a sequence that must inevitably end in misfortune.
Oh, wow. We create a false dichotomy. We decide that good and bad are a forced pair.
Exactly. We establish a deeply pessimistic worldview where happiness is intrinsically linked to impending doom.
That is so bleak.
It is. But there's another layer to this metaphor that does even more damage to our daily lives. Notice the active verb in the phrase.
Waiting.
Yes, it's not just about the shoe dropping. The entire focus of the phrase is on the act of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Because while you're waiting, you're entirely paralyzed.
Completely.
You aren't reading your book. You aren't talking to your family. You are just holding your breath.
The waiting completely, utterly pulls you out of the joy of the present moment. You cannot be immersed in the laughter of your children or the complex flavors of a meal or the beauty of a sunset if your primary cognitive task is anticipating an auditory cue of disaster from the ceiling above you.
It's impossible.
The waiting consumes the joy entirely. It demands all your bandwidth.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because if we look logically at this metaphor, it's totally irrational.
How do you mean?
Why do we universally assume that the universe operates on a system of exact, punishing equilibrium?
Right.
It's this bizarre assumption that if I was given 1 unit of joy, the universe is now ethically obligated to deliver 1 unit of tragedy to balance the cosmic books.
Like a ledger that has to be balanced.
Exactly. I always visualize it like someone walking around on a perfectly beautiful 75-degree cloudless sunny day with a massive black golf umbrella completely open.
That's a striking image.
They're just trudging down the sidewalk, squinting suspiciously at the blue sky, completely miserable, because they are absolutely convinced the sunshine is an elaborate trick.
That is a highly accurate visual of hyperarousal.
Right?
The person with the open umbrella on a sunny day looks ridiculous to everyone else walking by, but to their own internal logic, they are being incredibly responsible.
They think they're outsmarting the weather.
They are being safe. They are guarding against the inevitable.
But they are missing the sun. They're living in the artificial shadow of their own umbrella. Why is it so incredibly difficult for us to just put the umbrella down, fold it up, and trust the weather?
Because of vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
That is the root psychological mechanism driving the other shoe anxiety. Happiness makes us feel uniquely and terrifyingly exposed.
Exposed how?
Well, when we are miserable, when we are struggling or fighting through a crisis, we are in a defensive posture. Our emotional shields are up, our armor is securely fastened.
We're ready for a fight.
But when we are truly deeply happy, our shields are down, our hearts are open. And more importantly, when we are happy, we finally have something of immense value to lose.
The stakes get higher.
Much higher.
The contrast between what we have and what we could lose becomes much sharper.
The stakes become astronomical. If you have nothing, you fear losing nothing. But if you have profound love, excellent health, a peaceful home, a fulfilling career.
Suddenly your brain becomes acutely aware of how incredibly fragile those things are.
Exactly. The joy itself highlights the impermanence of the joy. So the waiting, the act of tensing up, holding the massive umbrella, bracing the muscles for impact, is actually a somatic defense mechanism.
It's a way to guard ourselves.
It's the psychological and physical armor against the excruciating vulnerability of joy. We subconsciously think, if I stay physically and emotionally tense, if I keep aggressively scanning the horizon, the loss won't destroy me when it inevitably happens.
So this hypervigilance, this absolute insistence on scanning the cloudless blue sky for storm clouds, completely warps our relationship with the concept of calm.
It does. It fundamentally alters it.
If we can never let our guard down, then calmness isn't restful. Which brings us to arguably the most terrifying and counterintuitive concept in our deep dive today.
The idea that peace actually feels like a threat.
Yes. The specific focus concept from our source text states, for many of us, peace feels like a trap.
This is the critical juncture where the anxiety transitions from being just a nagging abstract thought into a profound physiological state of distress.
Let's really pull apart that word, trap. We're saying that peace, calmness, quiet, a lack of conflict, a Sunday afternoon, is interpreted by the human nervous system not as a reward, but as a literal trap.
If we deconstruct the mechanics of a trap, what are we really talking about?
Something that catches you.
Right. But a trap is an object or a situation specifically engineered to look inviting. It is deceptive by its very nature.
Oh, like bait.
Exactly. It offers something ostensibly good, like a piece of cheese on a mousetrap, or a beautiful sunlit clearing in the woods where a snare is hidden.
Solely for the purpose of capturing, containing, and harming the prey that desires the good thing.
A trap weaponizes your own desire against you. It uses what you want to destroy you.
Precisely. So if you, deep in your subconscious programming, view peace as a trap, consider the broader implications of what that means about how you view reality.
You're seeing enemies everywhere.
You're interpreting the universe itself as a hostile hunter. You are the prey. The universe is dangling a quiet Sunday afternoon in front of you, not as a gift to be enjoyed, but as bait to lure you out of your armored bunker.
That is a terrifying way to live, because if the universe is the hunter, then calm is no longer a resting state.
If we follow that logic, calm is the deadliest state of all.
Because in this worldview, calm is viewed entirely as a deceptive setup for imminent pain.
The quiet isn't just a lack of noise.
It's the specific, terrifying silence of a predator holding its breath right before it pounces.
Let me pause there, because the piece that really trips me up is how contradictory this is to everything we consciously want.
It is quite the paradox.
Isn't peace the ultimate goal? I mean, look at human behavior across the board. We spend our entire lives, our careers, our physical energy working toward calm.
We do.
We hustle, we grind, we go to years of therapy, we save meticulously for retirement, we download meditation apps, we go on yoga retreats, all so we can finally, supposedly, reach a state of peace.
That's the dream.
So why on earth would our nervous system violently reject the finish line the exact moment we cross it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of neurobiology, we have to look at how a human nervous system develops, adapts, and calibrates to its environment over decades.
Okay, calibration.
Your prefrontal cortex, the logical, conscious part of your brain, cares about abstract goals like inner peace, retirement, or mindfulness.
Right, the goals we set for ourselves.
But your amygdala and your autonomic nervous system do not care about your meditation app.
Not even a little bit.
They care exclusively about familiarity because familiarity is the metric they use to guarantee survival.
Familiarity equals safety. Even if the familiar thing is objectively terrible, it prefers the devil it knows.
Exactly. Let's look at somatic memory and baseline arousal. If a person is used to chaotic environments,
like growing up in a volatile household,
or perhaps they've spent a decade working in an incredibly high-stress, cutthroat profession, or they have simply been chronically stressed about finances for years.
their nervous system has physically calibrated itself to chaos.
It has set chaos, conflict, and high cortisol levels as the baseline of normal. When you are in a chaotic environment, you have to be highly alert, highly reactive, and constantly putting out fires just to survive.
Your body is essentially addicted to its own adrenaline and cortisol.
Yeah.
The engine is just always revving in the red.
Yes. Your baseline resting state isn't actually rest. It is a state of low-grade, constant panic. Your body comes to rely on that dopamine and adrenaline cycle to feel functional.
So what happens when you take that finely tuned, highly reactive nervous system and suddenly drop it into a totally peaceful, quiet, calm environment?
Like the quiet Sunday afternoon with the warm coffee.
Yeah. The system freaks out. It doesn't know what to do without the friction.
It completely short circuits because calm feels intensely unfamiliar to a nervous system calibrated for chaos. And to the primitive brain, unfamiliar automatically equals dangerous.
So it panics.
The brain interprets the sudden absence of chaos not as hard-won safety, but as a highly sophisticated trick. It interprets peace merely as the eye of the storm.
I want to dig into that analogy, the eye of the storm, because that perfectly captures the paranoia of the experience.
It really does. In the exact center of a hurricane, the barometric pressure changes. The howling wind abruptly stops.
The sky might even clear up and show blue.
The birds might come out. It feels objectively peaceful. But anyone who understands the meteorology of hurricanes knows that the peace is a temporary illusion.
The back half of the storm is massive, it is coming, and it's going to be brutal.
If your somatic memory genuinely believes that life is fundamentally a storm, then a moment of peace is just the eerie, deceptive quiet before the real destruction hits. You do not relax in the eye of the storm.
You use that time to frantically nail plywood over the windows. You hoard water. You brace yourself for the second impact.
Because if you let your guard down and take a nap during the eye of the storm, the back wall of the hurricane is going to rip the roof off your house while you're asleep.
Wow.
That is exactly how the brain treats a quiet Sunday afternoon. It is frantically nailing emotional plywood over the windows of your mind, anticipating the second half of the storm.
So if peace is interpreted as a trap, and joy is just the cheese on the mousetrap, and the quiet is just the precursor to the other shoe dropping, what do?
We react.
Right. We don't just sit there paralyzed forever, right? Human beings are active participants in our own lives.
Yeah.
We eventually try to escape the trap.
We do. And the way we escape the trap is the tragic culmination of this entire cycle. We don't just endure the trap, we actively sabotage the environment to blow the trap up.
Which brings us to the core behavioral phenomenon from our text, foreboding joy, and how to stop sabotaging the good moments because you're afraid they won't last.
It's a crucial distinction to make.
Let's define this clearly so we know exactly what we're looking at. What is foreboding joy, fundamentally?
Foreboding joy is the emotional experience we've been detailing. It is the cold, sudden shadow that falls over a brilliant, happy moment.
Give me an example.
It is the experience of standing at the altar at your wedding and suddenly having a flashing, intrusive thought about your partner dying in a car crash.
Oh, that's dark.
Or it is looking at your healthy, sleeping, newborn child and suddenly being paralyzed by the thought of a terminal illness.
Just out of nowhere.
It is getting the promotion you've worked 5 years for and immediately feeling sick to your stomach with the absolute certainty that you are a fraud and you're going to be fired.
Is pure joy, instantaneously corrupted by the dread of losing that exact joy.
It's the shadow.
But the sabotage, that is the behavioral reaction to the shadow. The foreboding is what happens to you. The sabotage is what you do in response.
Yes. The feeling of foreboding is an internal emotional state. The sabotage is the concrete action you take in the external world because your nervous system cannot tolerate the internal feeling.
Oh, act out.
Because you are so fundamentally afraid the good moment won't last, you unconsciously destroy the good moment yourself just to get the suspense over with.
They just end it.
You are initiating a trauma response, specifically a fight or flight response, directed at your own happiness.
So what does this all mean in practice? How does it look in real life? To me, if we overlay this with a more mundane example, imagine you are sitting down to watch a fantastic movie.
Okay.
It's critically acclaimed. The cinematography is beautiful. Characters are rich and deeply engaging. You are loving it. You are emotionally invested.
I'm a great time.
But, just from the genre or the tone, that it's probably going to have a devastatingly sad ending. So right at the climax, right before the final act begins, you just stand up, grab the remote, and turn the TV off.
You just cut it off.
You pull the plug, you walk out of the room, just so you don't have to feel the natural, inevitable sadness of the movie being over or the tragedy of the ending.
That is exactly the behavioral pattern of sabotage. You preemptively terminate the experience.
But you've ruined the movie. You didn't get to experience the emotional payoff.
True.
You've guaranteed a bad, unfulfilling experience simply to avoid a potentially sad experience. You've robbed yourself.
This raises an important question, maybe the most important psychological question of all when dealing with self-sabotage.
What's that?
Why do we consistently choose a certain guaranteed pain ruining the moment over an uncertain potential joy?
Why do we proactively turn the TV off when we were enjoying this show?
The answer is almost entirely about power and control. Human beings have a desperate, deep-seated psychological need for agency.
We need to feel like we're in charge.
When you are experiencing profound joy, you are fundamentally out of control. You are at the mercy of the universe, the economy, your health, your partner, hoping that none of those external factors take the joy away.
You're just floating.
That powerlessness, that total lack of agency, is excruciating for an anxious brain. But by sabotaging the moment, we regain the steering wheel. We seize control.
We get to dictate exactly when and how the pain happens.
If I ruin the piece, at least I'm not caught off guard. I am the architect of my own disaster, which feels marginally safer than being a victim of a random disaster.
Exactly. Let's return to the tenement metaphor. If the universe is holding a heavy boot over your head and you are exhausted and terrified from waiting hours for it to drop, you might eventually decide to just reach up, grab the boot, and yank it down onto your own head.
It hurts, it causes damage, but at least the agonizing suspense is over.
At least you did it on your own terms. You drop the shoe yourself.
You solved the ambiguity of the situation through self-destruction?
I want to ask you, the listener, to really reflect on your own habits right now. Because this sabotage rarely looks like someone dramatically saying, I am intentionally destroying this beautiful moment.
No, it's never that obvious.
It is incredibly insidious. It disguises itself as logic or righteousness. Think about your last really great vacation. Everything's going perfectly.
The weather is beautiful, you're deeply relaxed.
The food is incredible. Do you suddenly find yourself picking a massive, escalating, unnecessary fight with your partner over something completely trivial like how to read the GPS or where to park the rental car?
Yes, creating interpersonal conflict is the #1 way we sabotage peace.
We just invent a problem.
The quiet feels too threatening, the connection feels too vulnerable, so we manufacture a crisis. We initiate a fight response to bring the environment's tension back up to a chaotic baseline that our nervous system actually recognizes and knows how to navigate.
We know how to argue. We don't know how to just be happy.
Or what about at work? This is a classic cognitive distortion selective abstraction.
Well, how does that play out?
Let's say you give a major high-stakes presentation. You absolutely nail it. You get a standing ovation. Your boss pulls you aside and tells you it was brilliant.
A total win.
You go home, pop a bottle of champagne, and celebrate. Or do you lie awake at 3 a.m., heart counting, obsessing over the one tiny formatting error you noticed on slide 14?
Oh, man. So many people do that.
You completely invalidate the massive sea of praise because you are hyper-focusing on a single, insignificant critique.
That is cognitive sabotage. You are actively, chemically refusing to ingest the joy.
Your brain finds the one tiny flaw and magnifies it to block out the overwhelming vulnerability of success.
You are using the typo on slide 14 as the other shoe, so you don't have to wait for a bigger one to drop.
Recognizing the sabotage, seeing the mechanics of it for what they truly are, is the absolute only way to stop it.
We have to realize that when we start picking that vicious fight in the rental car, we aren't actually mad about the GPS. We don't care about the parking spot.
We are terrified of how good the vacation feels.
And we are trying to wrest control back from the unpredictable universe by burning the moment to the ground ourselves.
It requires profound, almost uncomfortable self-awareness to stop in that moment, regulate your nervous system, take a deep breath, and say to yourself, I am doing this because I am afraid.
I'm not angry, I'm vulnerable.
I am trying to destroy the peace before the peace has a chance to destroy me. Once you name the mechanism, once you drag it out of the subconscious and into the prefrontal cortex, it loses a massive amount of its power over your behavior.
You stop reacting to the somatic memory and start responding to the present reality.
Exactly.
Well, we've gone incredibly deep today, pulling apart a tiny but explosive piece of text. We started with the anxiety of anticipated misfortune, unpacking the neurobiology of how our amygdala acts as a hypervigilant prediction machine,
forcing us to pay exorbitant emotional interest on debts that simply do not exist.
Right. We examined the vivid, stressful, historical metaphor of waiting for the other shoe to drop, and how that somatic waiting forces us to hold heavy umbrellas open on cloudless sunny days, constantly bracing for the punishment we falsely assume must mathematically follow happiness.
And we analyze the tragic reality of how, for nervous systems chronically calibrated to chaos and high cortisol, peace genuinely feels like a hunter's trap.
It feels like the deceptive, eerie eye of the hurricane, prompting us to board up our emotional windows rather than just rest.
And we finally looked at the inevitable behavioral tragedy of treating peace like a trap, the impulse to sabotage.
The insidious ways we preemptively ruin our own foreboding joy, picking fights and obsessing over typos just to maintain a twisted, painful sense of control over our own misery.
There's a lot to process.
But the crucial takeaway, the really vital thing to remember, is that joy is inherently vulnerable. It has to be. But that vulnerability does not have to be a warning sign of impending doom.
The vulnerability is actually the biological proof that the joy is real.
Vulnerability is not weakness. And it is not a trap. It is the immense courage to keep your shields down and stay open to the present moment, even when your ancient brain chemistry is screaming at you to close off and prepare for war.
So the next time you find yourself having a perfect Sunday afternoon and you feel that sudden cold spike of panic down your neck.
Or the next time you feel the overwhelming urge to brace for impact during a truly happy moment.
Try something radically different.
Don't pull the plug on the TV. Don't pick the fight about the GPS. Just acknowledge the fear. Say hello to the primitive part of your brain that is trying to protect you, and then try to just let the metaphorical shoe hover.
Let it stay suspended up there against the ceiling. You don't have to yank it down.
Just breathe, regulate your nervous system, and step back into the sunshine without the umbrella.
As we close out today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over as you go about your week.
What's that?
If we spend all our happiest, most beautiful moments constantly bracing for a disaster that hasn't happened yet, doesn't that mean we are actually experiencing the misfortune twice?
Oh, wow.
Once in the agonizing theater of our imaginations, and once in reality. And worse, what if we are paying that heavy, exhausting emotional toll for a dropping shoe that never even existed in the first place?
Thanks for spending this time with us on Coffee Break. If this conversation stayed with you, you can find more episodes here on the channel. Until next time, take care.